Good evening. I'm Daniel Brooks. 50,000 government workers, gone, overnight. Scientists who research climate change, fired. Election officials who certify votes, replaced. Whistleblowers who expose corruption, stripped of all protection. This is not a reorganization. This is not efficiency. This is a purge. And it happened while you were sleeping. The United States government, the institution that is supposed to serve 330 million Americans, has just been handed over to one man's loyalists. Experts with decades of experience? Replaced. Career professionals who follow the law? Eliminated. Independent voices who speak truth to power? Silenced. This is the biggest government takeover in 100 years, and almost nobody is talking about it. If you want to understand what is really happening in this country, if you want to know how democracy is being dismantled piece by piece, you need to subscribe to Daniel Brooks Reports right now. Because this channel brings you the investigations that mainstream media is afraid to touch, the stories they bury, the truth they don't want you to know. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's expose what they're hiding. Last week, while the country was distracted by other headlines, the Trump administration finalized something called Schedule F. Most Americans have never heard of it, and that is exactly how they wanted it. Schedule F is a new classification for federal employees. Under this policy, 50,000 government workers can now be fired at will. No cause, no protection, no appeals. If they displease the president, they are gone. Let me be very clear about what this means. For over 100 years, the United States civil service system has operated under a principle called merit-based hiring. That means government jobs are filled by people who are qualified, who pass exams, who have expertise, and once hired, they cannot be fired for political reasons. They serve the Constitution, not the president. Schedule F destroys that system. Now, any federal employee whose job is classified as policy influencing can be reclassified as Schedule F. And once reclassified, they lose all job protections. They can be fired for any reason, or no reason at all. Who decides what jobs are policy influencing? The president's appointees. Who decides which employees get reclassified? The president's appointees. Who decides who gets hired to replace them? The president's appointees. This is not oversight. This is a loyalty test. And here is what makes this even more disturbing. When the Trump administration first proposed Schedule F in 2024, they opened it up for public comment. That is required by law. The government has to let citizens weigh in before making major policy changes. 94% of public comments opposed Schedule F. 94%. Legal experts, former government officials, bipartisan groups, all said the same thing. This is dangerous. This undermines democracy. This concentrates power in the hands of one person. The Trump administration ignored every single one of them and implemented it anyway. So who are these 50,000 people that Trump can now fire? Climate scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the people who study hurricanes, who track rising sea levels, who warn us about extreme weather. If their research concludes that climate change is real, and that conclusion influences policy, they can now be classified as Schedule F and fired. Election officials at the Department of Homeland Security, the people who certify that our elections are secure, who verify voter rolls, who investigate election fraud. If they say an election was fair and Trump disagrees, they can be fired. Economists at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the people who calculate unemployment rates, who measure inflation, who produce the data that determines whether the economy is growing or shrinking. If their numbers make the administration look bad, they can be fired. Lawyers at the Department of Justice, the people who decide which cases to prosecute, who interpret the law, who defend the Constitution. If they refuse to prosecute the president's enemies, or if they try to investigate the president's allies, they can be fired. Whistleblower protections? Gone. That is not a separate issue. That is part of Schedule F. Under the old system, if a government employee discovered corruption and reported it, they were protected. The law said they could not be retaliated against. They could not be demoted. They could not be fired. Schedule F eliminates that protection. Now, if you blow the whistle on illegal activity and your job is classified as Schedule F, you can be fired immediately. And your case will be investigated by the very agency you reported, the agency run by political appointees, who serve at the pleasure of the president. Do you see the problem? This is not about making government more efficient. This is about making government more obedient. This is not the first time a president has tried to do this. In the 1800s, before the civil service system existed, government jobs were handed out based on loyalty. It was called the spoils system. When a new president was elected, he fired everyone and replaced them with his supporters. It did not matter if you were qualified. It mattered if you were loyal. The result? Corruption, incompetence, chaos. The civil service system was created specifically to stop this, to make sure government jobs were filled by people who knew what they were doing, not people who owed favors to politicians. For over a century, that system worked. Democrats and Republicans both respected it, because they understood that government needs to function regardless of who is in power. Schedule F brings back the spoils system, under a new name, with new legal language. But the effect is the same: loyalty over competence, obedience over expertise, power over principle. And here is the scariest part. This is just the beginning. Schedule F currently applies to 50,000 employees. But the language is vague enough that it could be expanded. Any job that influences policy could be reclassified. That is tens of thousands more workers, maybe hundreds of thousands. Imagine a government where every single employee, from the top to the bottom, owes their job to one person. Where speaking truth to power means losing your career. Where following the law means getting fired. That is not a democracy. That is an authoritarian regime. So where is Congress? Good question. Some Democrats have tried to fight this. Senator Tim Kaine introduced a bill to block Schedule F. It failed. Republicans voted it down. Some Democrats have filed lawsuits. They argue that Schedule F violates the Constitution, that it concentrates too much power in the executive branch, that it undermines the separation of powers. Those lawsuits are still pending. But here is the problem. Even if the courts eventually strike down Schedule F, the damage will already be done. Thousands of employees will have been fired. Thousands of loyalists will have been hired. And reversing that will take years. Meanwhile, what is the media doing? Not enough. A few outlets have covered this. The New York Times wrote an op-ed. NPR did a segment. But it has not been front-page news. It has not been breaking news. It has not been treated with the urgency it deserves. Why? Because Schedule F sounds boring. It sounds like bureaucratic policy. It sounds like something only government nerds care about. But it is not boring. It is terrifying. This is how democracies die. Not with tanks in the streets, not with coups, but with quiet policy changes, with legal language, with slow erosion of checks and balances. And by the time people notice, it is too late. Now let me tell you about something else that happened this week, something the administration does not want you paying attention to. The United States military killed 2 more people in the Pacific Ocean. They were on a boat. The military says it was a drug-trafficking boat. They say the people on board were narco-terrorists. Here is what they did not say. They did not say they found drugs on the boat. They did not say they identified the people before killing them. They did not say they gave them a chance to surrender. They just fired a missile and killed them. This is part of something called Operation Southern Spear. Since September, the U.S. military has carried out at least 36 strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. They have killed 119 people. The administration says all of those people were drug traffickers. But when members of Congress asked for evidence, military officials admitted they do not actually know who was on those boats. They do not have their names. They do not have proof they were trafficking drugs. They just assumed and killed them. This is not how law enforcement works. This is not how justice works. For decades, when the U.S. Coast Guard intercepted suspected drug boats, they arrested the people, brought them to trial, let a jury decide if they were guilty. Now, execution without trial. No evidence, no due process, just missiles. 119 people dead, and the media barely mentions it. Why? Because Schedule F sounds boring. It sounds like bureaucratic policy. It sounds like something only government nerds care about. But it is not boring. It is terrifying. This is how democracies die. Not with tanks in the streets, not with coups, but with quiet policy changes, with legal language, with slow erosion of checks and balances. And by the time people notice, it is too late. Now let me tell you about something else that happened this week, something the administration does not want you paying attention to. The United States military killed 2 more people in the Pacific Ocean. They were on a boat. The military says it was a drug-trafficking boat. They say the people on board were narco-terrorists. Here is what they did not say. They did not say they found drugs on the boat. They did not say they identified the people before killing them. They did not say they gave them a chance to surrender. They just fired a missile and killed them. This is part of something called Operation Southern Spear. Since September, the U.S. military has carried out at least 36 strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. They have killed 119 people. The administration says all of those people were drug traffickers. But when members of Congress asked for evidence, military officials admitted they do not actually know who was on those boats. They do not have their names. They do not have proof they were trafficking drugs. They just assumed and killed them. This is not how law enforcement works. This is not how justice works. For decades, when the U.S. Coast Guard intercepted suspected drug boats, they arrested the people, brought them to trial, let a jury decide if they were guilty. Now, execution without trial, no evidence, no due process, just missiles. 119 people dead, and the media barely mentions it. And one more thing, because this story is almost too absurd to believe. President Trump is suing the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, the agency that works for him, for $10 billion. Why? Because someone at the IRS leaked his tax returns in 2020. Now, that leak was illegal. The person who did it was caught, prosecuted, convicted, sent to federal prison. Justice was served. But Trump wants $10 billion anyway. And if he wins, or if the government settles, guess who pays? You do. American taxpayers. This week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified before the Senate. A Democratic senator asked him directly, if Trump wins this lawsuit, where does the $10 billion come from? Bessent's answer? The Treasury, which means taxpayers. So let me get this straight. The President of the United States is suing his own government, and if he wins, the American people have to pay him. Not the person who leaked the documents, not the IRS, the taxpayers. And here is the kicker. Since the leak, Trump's net worth has nearly tripled. He is now worth over $6 billion. So even if the leak caused him harm, which is debatable, he has clearly recovered. But he wants $10 billion anyway, from you. This is not about justice. This is about money and power, and using the government as a personal piggy bank. 50,000 government workers fired and replaced with loyalists. 119 people killed without trial. A sitting president suing his own government for $10 billion taxpayer dollars. These are not normal times. This is not politics as usual. This is a systematic dismantling of democratic institutions, and it is happening right now. The mainstream media will not tell you this story. They will cover the spectacle, the tweets, the scandals, but they will not connect the dots. They will not show you the pattern. That is why Daniel Brooks Reports exists, to investigate, to expose, to hold power accountable. If you found this information valuable, subscribe. Share this video with everyone you know, because the only way we stop this is by spreading the truth. This is Daniel Brooks, and I'll see you in the next investigation.